Well, thank you all for coming today. And I want to introduce both Susan Rask, who is the Board of Health Director, and Tricia McGeehan, who is the Public Health Nurse in Concord, for a wonderful talk on understanding tick and tick-borne illnesses. And we're getting into that season, but Susan's the expert and Trish, so they'll explain it all. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, Susan and Trish.
I'm sorry, I feel like my back is all to you, and that's kind of rude. But I have to I didn't bring my mouse, so I gotta kind of stand by the laptop. So, we're gonna talk about three things today. First thing I'm gonna talk about is a little bit sort of about what are ticks and what is the natural history and what do you need to know about the animal. And then we'll go into the diseases, and Trish will talk to you about the signs and symptoms of the diseases and what you wanna look out for. And then I will wrap it up by some kind of common sense prevention tips that I hope you all will use so that you don't end up with one of these diseases. So, that being said, also I will say that Gabrielle, who works with me, she's one of our health inspectors, was out over the weekend and picked 2 deer ticks off of her dog. So anytime it's above freezing, those ticks are out and active. So to think that we're just heading into tick season, we're in tick season, just so you know.
So were they out all year round since we had 80-degree weather in
Anytime it's above 40, they're out. I would count on that. Okay, so let's start a little bit with tick facts and the life cycle, and then we'll talk about the tick-borne diseases, and then we'll talk about prevention. Here comes somebody. So what are ticks? They're actually arachnids, they're not insects, they're ectoparasites. They feed on the blood of pretty much anything they can take a blood meal from. And unlike mosquitoes that feed quickly, ticks are designed to stay for a while. They'll stay on you for 48 to 72 hours while they completely engorge with blood. And what makes them particularly sort of interesting is that little mouth part that you see at the top of the animal actually has barbed hooks. So as they burrow into your skin, they're very hard to pull out, and they clearly intend to stay for a while. And Steve Rich, who's out at the Laboratory of Medical Zoology at UMass, has a great video of them like putting their little barbed thing in, and what they actually do when they feed is they open up that mouth and they sort of circulate their gut contents into your bloodstream while they're taking the blood out of you. And that's how the diseases are transmitted. So it's actually kind of a disturbing video to watch, so maybe not watch it.
Yes.
Maybe don't. Maybe I won't incorporate it. Oopsie days, I keep doing that. Okay, so there are many types of ticks. We have 4 types of ticks that are common in New England. The deer tick, which is the one that we're concerned about, that transmit Lyme disease and most of the other diseases that we worry about. The dog tick, which is the bigger one that you will sometimes find on dogs. Those live in sort of hot, grassy areas. I used to live and work down on Cape Cod where we have lots of hot, grassy areas, and dog ticks were really common down there. The Lone Star tick is what we used to consider a southern tick, but there's good evidence now that it's in New England. So you may see that, and you can't see it here, but the female has a little white spot on her carapace, which is why they call it the Lone Star tick. And then there's the brown dog tick, which I've never actually seen, but they say we have it. And I don't think that one's particularly associated with any diseases. So here is the deer tick. The deer tick has 3 life stages: a larva, a nymph, and an adult. And the adult female is really distinguishable because she's red and black. There's no other tick that looks like that. Although she's small, if you see one that's red and black, you know it's an adult female deer tick. The adult males are all black. You don't have to worry so much about them because they don't feed. They don't ever take a blood meal. Well, they do when they molt from larva to nymph, or nymph to adult, but they don't feed as adults, so you don't have to worry about them so much.
So the only one you have to worry about is the female?
Well, we're gonna get to that. In terms of adults, yes, but you have to worry about all the nymphs, and we'll come into that in a moment, because that's the important part. If you can take one message away from this, that's the important message. You do have to worry about the nymphs. So how do they feed? They actually search for a host. They'll go up on shrubs and vegetation, and they put out their little claws, and they do what we call questing. They just wait for some animal to come by that they can latch onto. So the important thing to know is that they're gonna most likely attach to you from your feet up to your knees because that's about where they are in the shrubs. So you don't have to worry about them falling down onto you, that's probably not what's going to happen. So when we get to prevention, you'll know why I'm telling you that if you're gonna spray your clothing with permethrin, shoes and socks are the best places to apply the spray, but we'll get to that too. So they're actually basically designed to latch onto anything that, any warm-blooded animal that they bump up against. So how big are these things? I always tell you to check your bagels. The nymphs are the size of poppy seeds. They are tiny. If they bite you, you're not going to know, you're so often not gonna know you're bitten. They're tiny, they're the size of a poppy seed. If if they're in your hairline or somewhere that you're not looking at all the time, you're not gonna feel them, you're not gonna know you're bitten. And even if they're on a part of your body that you can see, it looks like the tiniest scab from like a rose thorn prick or something. It's this little teeny brown thing. So it's really easy to be bitten by them and not know it.
So does the larva, sorry, does the larva bite, because you went right to the nymph?
We're coming to that. That's like the next slide. We're getting
Yeah,
there.
I'm always on the next slide.
I know. But I want you to just think about what size these things are, because that's really kind of critically important. So the nymphs are the size of poppy seeds, and the adults are the size of sesame seeds, which is not actually very big either. But you tend to feel a bite from those because every time I've been bitten by them, they cause inflammation. It feels like a ripe pimple, kind of. They cause enough inflammation that you're likely to feel it, but there's plenty of people that have been bitten and never felt it, so don't count on that either. So that's just sort of their real sizes against a human finger. They're really tiny. And the other important thing to know is that deer ticks, I remember I just said dog ticks don't mind hot, sunny environments. The deer ticks really want to live in wooded, brushy areas with high humidity. They're pretty sensitive to heat and being dried out. And the important thing about that is your exposure is going to be when you're out in the woods or at the fringe area between the woods and the border, like where your backyard kind of goes into the woods and the shrubs. And especially in a town like Concord, so many of our neighborhoods have encroached into deer tick habitat. So we're living amongst them. And there's nothing we can do about that other than be aware that they're with us. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the life stages, which will get to your question. They have 4 stages: egg, larva, nymph, and adult. It's a 2-year life cycle, and the ticks only feed a total of 3 times in their entire 2-year life. Once as a larva, once as a nymph, and once as an adult. 3 meals total, which is why they have to make each meal be good. Okay, so this one's a little complex, but I'm going to try to explain the life cycle. So in the first spring, the eggs hatch out, and they hatch out into larvae. The larvae are not infected with anything. The larvae are going to feed on small mammals like mice or birds, and that's where they're going to pick up Lyme disease and all these other diseases, because these things are the host for the disease. They carry the bacteria in their body. So the larva feeds once, it overwinters to the next spring, and then it molts into the nymph, the teeny tiny poppy seed size nymph. Now the nymph needs to take another blood meal so that it can molt into an adult. So the important thing, and it's going to feed off of small mammals, but it also will feed off of larger mammals. I mean, it's going to quest until it finds something that it can latch onto and have a blood meal. So the important thing to remember or to know is that once this thing becomes a nymph, sometime in the late spring, it's going to be looking for a blood meal all through that late spring and all through that summer. And so the greatest risk of human infection is late spring and summer. So May, June, July, August. That's when you're probably more like June, July, August. And then the nymph has a blood meal and it molts into an adult. It overwinters through another winter, and then in the early spring or late winter, it lays its eggs. And each tick lays about 3,000 eggs. So that alone is kind of disgusting.
So they survive over the winter?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, they'll go dormant when it's frozen, and the moment it's above freezing, they're active. I've been out in February and picked them up. You know, if you get a little February thaw. So they're very tough critters.
Wow.
You have to respect them in that sense.
Me too.
That's amazing.
So, like I just said, the greatest risk of infection is not from the deer tick adults because they're most active looking for blood meals in fall and spring. About 50% of them carry Lyme disease, but you're much more likely to detect their bite. The highest risk is from the nymph stage, late May into August. Only about 20% of them carry Lyme, but their bite is very difficult to detect. So we'll come later to if you start feeling unwell in the summer and you don't know why you're not feeling well, don't ignore it. Because so many people just are like, oh, I have a little virus, I have a little something, they don't know they've been bitten and they're like, yeah, I don't feel good, but I'll ignore it. And especially with Lyme disease, those initial symptoms go away. The other diseases, you'll be more acutely ill, and Tricia will talk about that. And here's just a graph. The top one is the number of cases of Lyme disease in Massachusetts, and you can see the highest cases are reported in June, July, and August. And also there's actually an interesting distribution of who gets the diseases. Most people that get it are kids or older people, and I think that's because that's who's outside. Sort of middle-aged people are inside working. Other people are out having fun. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Trish, who's going to talk to you about some of the diseases.
Alrighty. Does anyone here want to raise their hand if they've had Lyme disease or been diagnosed with Lyme disease? Can you tell me your story?
Sure, I didn't feel the bite.
Mhm.
I felt the symptoms, the classic symptoms, kind of a headache, joint aches. I wasn't sure what it was, but then I also did see kind of a rash on my shin,
Mm-hmm.
and I went and had the blood work, and sure enough, it was. And then I got the antibiotic, I think the 21-day,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it took care of it.
Good. Some people, you guys have probably heard about that classic bullseye rash that you can get from Lyme disease. Sometimes, quite often, that is from the tick actually biting you. After a period of time, if you get Lyme disease, if you have headache, fatigue, if you're just not feeling well, I have to kind of back up. In the summertime, I read a lot of medical records, and presenting complaints to the emergency room, people will say, it's July 4th, I have the flu, I can't believe it, I'm achy and I'm tired, I thought flu season was over. When in fact, it's most likely a tick-borne illness. Over the past several years, emergency rooms have done a really good job when people come in with presenting symptoms of flu-like. Just think about what the flu is. Just, headache, their joints may even be swollen, painful. Most hospitals are doing a tick panel and checking for all of these illnesses. With Lyme disease, what happens is people will just kind of brush it off, as Susan said. I just have a virus, I don't feel well, it's the middle of July and whatever, I can't be that sick. If you don't get that classic bullseye rash, a lot of times when I do the follow-up communicable disease reporting for several towns around here, people say, I never saw a tick, can't believe I had Lyme disease. If Lyme disease goes untreated, 60%, they say 60% after a long period of time can develop chronic Lyme, where you have, and you guys probably have talked to people, neighbors or family or friends that have chronic Lyme, where it wasn't caught early enough, it wasn't treated, and they go and continue to have symptoms of arthritis. They can have cardiac issues, low heart rate, just chronic fatigue, depression, some stars. I've read some newspaper articles about some people like Avril Lavigne, who's a singer who had it, very sad. I want to tell you one story. So my mom was visiting years ago, and my husband's never sick. And he's like, it was summertime, he said, I just don't feel well, I don't know if I can come down and visit. I'm like, come on, let's go. I thought he was just not being, a good family team member. Sure enough, I went back up to the bedroom later on. He took off his shirt and I see all these splotches, like someone took tennis balls and went, that's disseminated Lyme disease. So he had been bit quite a while ago, but that's not all Lyme. Those aren't tick bites per se, but the bacteria had gone through his body and it was presenting with this rash. So that was pretty pronounced, and I felt very badly for making fun of him that he didn't want to come down and participate in the family dinner. Let's see, so babesiosis is another emerging tick-borne illness. This one can be transmitted through a blood transfusion. So if I get a case, comes across my desktop, and someone is positive for babesiosis, one of the questions I ask is, have you given blood recently or have you received a blood transfusion? Because what's happening is people will get babesiosis, it's in their blood, they may not know it, because symptoms for babesiosis may not show up for 8 weeks. They give blood and then that is in the blood product.
It's
Rare.
If you're giving blood, how is that?
How would you know? And they don't screen for it.
But you're giving blood.
So if you
You're
go
not
to the
getting blood.
Right. So if you are going to the blood bank, you got bit by a tick who was had the babesiosis bug in it, right?
Of course.
You wouldn't know, right? So
But
they
how would you do? I don't understand.
So you give blood and not know that you had Lyme disease.
right.
Oh, I
right.
see.
And then they put
That's
your
what-
blood in the
all
blood
right.
bank,
I
right?
understand. I'm
Right.
sorry.
Right.
That's what I meant.
It happened to me. I gave blood. I didn't know I had Lyme disease, and there was no screening.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even ask, and not that I would have known, but
Right.
I called afterwards to say, I now know I have Lyme disease, and
Mm-hmm.
they said they tested the lab. It really depends who I happen to be donating to Children's Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
They all seem to have their own policy depending
Right.
on where you.
Right.
Don't.
And Lyme disease, as far as I know, Susan, that is not one that's transferred through blood products.
Don't know.
It's babesiosis that is the one that can be found in the blood. So you may have been on an antibiotic or something that you were worried about.
I wasn't at the time.
You weren't, okay.
Well, that was a whole other. So I live in Concord.
Yeah.
But I went to Leahy Clinic,
Mhm.
infectious disease
Mhm.
clinic. So, I mean, my local doctor from Concord told me, oh, it's probably just a spider bite or something. Call us back in 10 days.
So,
They were wrong.
yes.
But it was what I wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm. Right. Isn't that nice? You guys just have to know that if you're you know how you feel on most days. If you are feeling ill, run down, you were spent any amount of time outside in the middle of summer, spring, these times that we're telling you about, you don't have the seasonal flu, the H1N1 or whatever. And you need to advocate for yourself and go to your doctor or call your doctor and get tested. With Lyme disease, most likely they will put you on doxycycline, which is a photosensitive antibiotic, meaning if you go outside, you have to make sure you're really covered because you can burn quite easily. Anaplasmosis is another emerging tick-borne illness. A lot of them have the same type of symptoms. And what's different about anaplasmosis as far as symptoms are concerned?
I think, I'm not a medical person, so I don't always know as much as you do.
Mhm.
I think you're gonna be much more acutely ill with babesiosis and anaplasmosis. Like you're really gonna feel sick.
Right. And if you're older, your immune system is quite not as strong, right, as a 20-year-old. So when you get hit, you're going to get hit harder than a younger person. These other,
You want me to go through the slides, Trish, or do you just wanna?
yeah, why don't you go through, I mean, you've got slides on these, don't you?
Yeah.
These new guys?
Yeah.
Sure.
I have a question, which is,
Yeah.
if I get bitten by a deer tick, can I get all 3 of these at once, or
Yes.
why?
Yes,
Oh,
you
yes.
can. It's a threefer.
The more we know about ticks, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
They can carry co-infections, it's really.
Yeah.
And you can get the tick tested if you want, to see what it's carrying.
They would refuse that. When I went to the infectious disease clinic, they refused.
You have to
Refuse
send it
what?
to UMass, to a private lab, and you have to pay for it, it's $40 at UMass, but they will test.
My vet tested, but
Oh.
my vet was more helpful
Are
when
you
I had
kidding?
Lyme disease.
That's amazing.
They know more at the time. This was 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
My vet was more helpful to me than Leahy Clinic infectious disease.
It's probably the same, that's terrible.
And you guys, when you see one, if you see one crawling on you, and I think Susan's got a slide on this, take tweezers, you grab them, and you dispose of them, you flush them. I mean, they're
I was just gonna ask that question. It's
Right.
difficult, sometimes if they attach.
They can get very embedded.
That's
Right,
right, and
right.
then you have to use the tweezers.
straight in, it's gonna pull your skin and you get as much as you can, pull it out.
And
I
the deer
found it
ticks are really fragile, they'll pull apart and they're the little head part will stay in your skin, but the belly will come off. That's okay. Your
Yeah.
body will eventually get rid of that little head part, so you don't have to worry if that
And
happens.
just sometimes you have to put it in alcohol or something, if you can't throw it
I
in.
flush it.
But if you can't do that, you can't just put it down somewhere and,
Correct.
right,
Correct.
that's what I'm asking.
Oh yeah, you don't want to mush it or anything like that. And it has to be attached for at least 24 hours with Lyme disease. The other diseases are a little longer. So if you see one crawling, you're okay.
Right.
It hasn't had its snack yet, so it hasn't given you that. It's
And the reason they say use pointy tweezers and get as close down to the head as you can is, remember I told you that when it puts its mouth part into you, it kind of recirculates what's in its gut into your bloodstream as it feeds. So like if you use kind of blunt tweezers and you squish its little gut part while you're taking it out, you're just kind of injecting that bacteria into yourself. So you try really hard to get the tweezer as close to your skin and just pull out as you can.
Great.
So this is just an interesting thing. This is sort of Lyme disease cases from 2001 to 2012, and you can see how it's just in 10 years, it's spread. It's all over the Northeast and the upper Midwest now, so you just have to know that. Anywhere you go in New England, this could be the case. Those are just the cases, how the cases have gone up. The confirmed and probables have gone up since 1996. It's now the most prevalent infectious disease in Massachusetts after hepatitis C. All of the right-hand column is sort of the case incidence in all the various counties in the state. Middlesex is kind of in the middle.
look at that. Look at
Yeah.
that, 700 compared to.
Right. So,
We hit the jackpot.
yeah, we do. So there's the bullseye rash. That's kind of the classic bullseye rash, but not everyone gets it. I often tell people you're almost lucky if you get it because then you know what's going on. So if you ever see that, go see your doctor, but many people get Lyme disease without the bullseye rash. Babesiosis, so you're going to have fever and chills and really feel awful with babesiosis, I think. And
Yeah, I had a good friend that had it last summer and she thought she had the 4th of July flu. I said, there's no such thing as
Right.
4th of July flu.
So I
Lyme
guess
disease.
I guess anaplasmosis is actually a rickettsia, which I did not know. Invades your white blood cells, not a good thing. So how many of our ticks are carrying this? These are emerging diseases. So we did a study a few years ago with UMass, and what we found out is in the Middlesex County ticks tested, 37% were carrying Lyme, 3% carry anaplasmosis, and 5% carry babesiosis. But so it's not all that high, but you still have to know those diseases are out there and that it's a possibility.
So when they test for Lyme, they don't test for the other ones. You have to specifically ask for the other ones.
Not all, it depends on the doctor and where you go. Now, I have seen at Emerson last summer, tick panel, so they do all of them. They're not just testing for Lyme anymore because they know these emerging tick,
So
Or
they're
no,
testing for all three.
they are.
Yeah,
You can always ask, you guys advocate for yourself. I wanna be, screened for
Right.
the whole panel.
So Leahy Infectious Disease did 7 blood tests, and I can't read, but I came in after getting bit. I just had a red bump and it was itchy, and then I started to get the flu-like symptoms, and actually, were vomiting, and really feeling bad. And then I looked down, and I had developed the ring.
Typically those bullseyes are not itchy. It'll feel warm to touch, and you may just have that, you may be getting a reaction to the bite itself. But if you see that people think rash and itch, it's usually just warm and raised. Another thing is ringworm, which is kind of a fungal infection, is a ring, but it's kind of a crusty ring. So if you have any sort of crusty skin, that's more ringworm, but that's not as common. But I saw some pictures of people going in saying, I think I have Lyme disease. And if you can go like this and you feel that crusty raised ridge, that's ringworm.
That's
That's not ideal
You
either.
said when you did 7 tests, you said,
7
for that.
tests.
And
You
it,
don't know what they were.
I can't read it, I took a picture.
yeah, so you can see the circle. And
But
they
that didn't happen until like
Right.
a week later.
That's right.
Yeah, Yeah,
So
if
yeah,
people
it's
wanna
not
see,
gonna,
that's
it's not
what-
gonna happen immediately after you get bitten. There's a
That's
period
what
of
I
time
didn't
that goes
realize.
by.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
didn't know. Then I got Bell palsy,
Right. Oh, wow.
and that's when I went back to the.
Another emerging one is Powassan virus, which you can get very sick from. There have been at least 3 deaths in Massachusetts, 2 on Cape Cod in 2016 and 17. That one actually is a little scary because transmission can occur within 30 minutes after being bitten. I don't think it's a huge worry, there's not that much of it around, but it does exist.
So is that some, what is it, do they test for that?
It's a virus, it's, I don't know.
You know, how are they, this is really a new one. I read that there are 100 cases in the last, didn't they say 100 cases in the last 10 years? And 10 of those cases were in Massachusetts.
But this
So-
came from Lyme, a tick bite?
From a tick bite. Yep, it's from a tick
This
bite.
came from a tick bite.
So this is like the BCOs and Anaplasmosis.
Right.
So
So-
now we got Powassan, just because, why not?
So so it's not tested for.
Not routinely, no. So at what point are they doing that? People are much sicker with this, so if they rule out the tick-borne illnesses and someone has a known tick bite, then maybe they go to that next level of testing. It's not routine at all.
And what is the treatment for the Powassan? Is it still the antibiotic or
It's a virus.
the virus?
Yeah,
Just
so that
there's
one,
no
you
treatment?
don't do anything, correct?
And then just to make things even more interesting, there's a new disease called Borrelia Miyamoto. The spirochete that causes Lyme is also a Borrelia. This is a different type of Borrelia. It's related to the one that causes tick-borne relapsing fever, which we do not have. And it was first seen in Massachusetts in 2013. So again, if you don't feel well, that's what tells you to go see a physician.
I think the big key is if you're not happy, make sure you get to somebody that's infected disease specialist,
Yes.
like you did.
I don't think you have to worry about tularemia. I will mention the Lone Star tick only because it's really new in Massachusetts. I don't think we have it around here, but it is definitely on the Cape and Islands if any of you go down there in the summer. As I said, the adult female's distinguished by the white dot on her back. It's a very aggressive tick that bites humans. It can cause ehrlichiosis, which is similar to anaplasmosis. And most interestingly, it could cause an allergic reaction to red meat. So that's just another.
Reason not eat, yeah.
I mean,
You want
the
the
more I know about ticks, the worse I feel.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that makes me feel good about it.
So are you considering a new position or new job?
No, she's gonna stay in the house forever.
You could do this every day, right? What do you need?
So that's the diseases, I think. But the good news is that tick-borne diseases are preventable.
Stay in the house.
But just, what I'd like to do is, remember all the work we've done to teach people to put on sunscreen to prevent skin cancer? I think that's how we have to start to think about ticks, because we're living with the ticks, they're not going away. So then we have to think about what we can do to protect ourselves. So, what I'm gonna discuss are using insect repellents for your skin, permethrin-treated clothing, daily tick checks, what you can do in your backyard, and then I think we've already gone through the disease awareness. So, anytime you're gonna be outside, whether you're out raking leaves or gardening or trail walking or whatever you're gonna do, you really wanna think about using a good insect repellent. But you need to be, and most of them are based on DEET, but you need to be aware that DEET comes in 2 strengths. 7% DEET is only effective against mosquitoes. So if you want something that's effective for ticks, you have to have over 20% DEET. And you should be looking for things on the label like deep woods, or sometimes they'll have a little tick symbol on the label like effective for ticks. So that's what you want to be looking for if you're going to purchase repellents.
So what about the children?
Are
there?
I actually have a handout. Talk about repellents. Pass around. There are warnings on what you can put on small children under 2.
So under 2 is the.
Yeah. And then a lot of people like to go with the sort of botanical or organic repellents because they don't feel good about putting chemicals on their skin. And those have some effectiveness, but I can tell you that they have not been nearly as well tested as DEET is for their repellent effects. So I won't tell you not to use them, but don't be overconfident about what they're doing for you. But it's important to be aware, repellents containing DEET are not sufficient to protect against tick bites because DEET only repels ticks, it doesn't kill them. So then maybe they'll be repelled from the areas like your arms and your legs where you put the DEET. They're repelled from that, so they walk higher up onto the areas of your body that you didn't put the DEET. So you're not killing the ticks with the DEET, you're just repelling them. So what we're doing for advice now is saying the best protection is to use a repellent and then treat your clothing with permethrin spray. So permethrin is safe, it kills ticks on contact. You can buy clothing that is either permethrin treated, or you can send your clothing away to be treated, or you can treat it yourself. If the tick gets on the clothing, it's going to die. Permethrin is very safe, it has very low mammalian toxicity, and as I said before, if you're going to treat anything, treat your shoes and socks. Because the ticks are down low, and that's probably where they're going to get on you.
I've heard you're supposed to tuck your pants under your socks and bring them up.
Yeah, and that's the advice we used to give people, and wear light colored clothing. But you know what? That hasn't prevented tick-borne diseases.
No, I'm not saying it'll prevent them, but it may help them get onto your skin.
It may. I mean, it may, and it may make them more visible so that you see them before they attach. But we now, I guess I would say about that is we've updated our advice to say use permethrin treated clothing because we know it works. And people are worried it's a chemical, but permethrin is derived from chrysanthemums. It's very low toxicity. And compared to the risk of getting a tick bite, I think it's a very low risk to take.
Where do you buy, where can you purchase that?
So,
Am I the only male in the audience here?
might be.
Huh?
It looks that way.
No.
No.
Oh, I thought he was part of the team. I have a series of things that relate to that.
Yeah.
But my home doctor is Paparello, who's the guy in charge of clinical diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And he just had a full body scan. And I don't know whether that should be adequate or not.
The full body of it, did he look at you from head to toe, or did you go into something? Are you talking about a test or a visual examination?
Yeah, it was to take your clothes off and.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's an infectious disease doctor, and a lot of people go to him for chronic tick-borne illnesses or whatever. So he was looking to make sure he couldn't find one of those poppy seeds, especially guys who are hairy. You're kind of harder to see them than
Okay.
us pasty, non-hairy
All
women.
right, so I shouldn't be scared.
No, he was probably doing you a favor.
Yeah, thorough, that's,
Mhm.
thorough is good.
All right,
So
thank you.
how do you get permethrin treated clothing? There's a great company called Insect Shield that you can mail your clothing into. So you can mail them a pair of shoes, you can mail them a pair of socks, a pair of pants, a shirt, and for about $10 an item, they will treat your clothing, and it'll be good for a whole season, like April to October, 70 washings. So what I say to people is, you know, if you have a set of gardening clothes or a set of clothes you hike in, get them treated in the spring, and then wear them all summer. And you can decide how much. You can also send camping equipment too, I think, for those who can. You can purchase the clothing pre-treated. It's much, I think, more expensive, but there are places like LL Bean and REI, whoopsie-daisy, that will sell it. Or you can treat your own clothing. You can buy the spray like Duranon or Repel. You don't put it on your clothing while you're wearing it. You take the clothing off, you hang it on the clothesline, you spray it liberally with the spray, follow the instructions. and you can treat your own clothing. If you have camping equipment, you can treat your own camping equipment. The only thing that you need to know about that is it's usually only good for about 6 washings. So that's why I think Insect Shield, where they really treat it in a much more thorough way, is probably a better deal and probably more effective. If you don't want to treat your clothing, another thing you can do is have a set of clothes that you use for yard work, and then when you come in, immediately take them off and put them in a hot dryer. Remember I said that deer ticks are very sensitive to dryness and heat? So putting them in, you would think that washing them would kill the ticks, but it doesn't. But I know, these things are so tenacious. So you put your clothes in a hot dryer and run it for 15 or 20 minutes in a hot dryer. Because what I know, and I do the same thing, I'm guilty of this. Like if I have a whole weekend of yard work, I'll have a set of clothes that I go out on Saturday, get them all dirty, and just sort of put them in the laundry basket. And then if I'm going out the next day, I put those same clothes back on to finish my yard work. Why get 2 sets of clothes dirty? But like you've just increased the risk of like infecting yourself by doing that. Like what I should be doing is putting them in a hot dryer at the end of Saturday before I put them back on Sunday.
But if you don't have a hot dryer, the person I knew that had babesiosis last summer, she has a summer home in the mid-coast of Maine, and she has a washer, but she has no dryer.
Well, then I would permethrin treat my clothes. That's what I would do.
Yeah, that's what I'm coming away with suggesting to her.
Yeah,
And don't re-wear your clothing
and don't rewear your clothing.
when you've been outside with it.
Right.
Or don't bring it inside. Like my husband almost takes all his clothes off and runs inside and leaves it outside. We're at a dead end, it's fine, but.
Yeah, I'm not so sure she's gonna go for that advice.
You make it a little casual.
But I appreciate the effort. And then he'll take it and put it in the wash. Yeah.
So, are we talking about even just like a lawn as opposed to tall grass?
We're coming to that.
Okay.
You're always like 2 slides ahead of me.
always ahead of me.
Curious mind. So ticks generally need to be attached for 24 hours to transmit disease. So the next thing we tell you to do is do a tick check every time you've been outside. So you want to, they can really attach anywhere. They're always saying like, look behind your ears, look in your armpits, look behind your knees. Honestly, I've been bitten by deer ticks many times and they can be anywhere. So now you have to kind of check your whole body and remember how small they are. And they will not wash off in the shower. Like once they've attached and embedded, remember how their mouth part goes right into you, they're not gonna wash off in the shower. So you might need a partner to help you check. Places you can't look at yourself. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about a little bit of the outside stuff. Remember I said they like nice, cool, humid, shady places? So they're not likely to be out in the middle of your lawn where it's hot and sunny and the grass is short. Although, that being said, I was out in the middle of my lawn last summer doing nothing but being out in the backyard and I got bitten by 2 nymphal ticks on 2 separate occasions. But it was a wet summer last year. But the much more risky area is sort of that border area where it's sort of clear and sort of shrubby and sort of leafy. They like to hang out in the leaf litter. That's where they overwinter. So that's why that thing says tick risky and tick safe.
What about weeding around plants and stuff?
So if you're out weeding in those sort of border areas, that's when I'd be wearing my permethrin treated clothing. Outrageous.
What about, along your fence or something?
If it's shrubby, if it's shady, if it's leafy, that's where they're gonna be.
What about recreation, like playing golf?
As long as you're on like the short sunny grass, you should be fine, but don't get in
Looking for your balls, the lost balls.
in the rough.
We used to worry about poison ivy, now we worry about ticks.
Right.
Yeah.
Any place you'd find poison ivy, you're probably likely to find ticks.
Okay.
Keep your eye on the ball
It's
and
good
keep
to
it on
know.
the green. Yeah, there you go.
So this is like a little sort of how you would, you want to rake your leaves, trim your shrubs, kind of clean up the yard so that you don't have so much of this sort of mixed border area. And then I especially say for people with kids, like create a border of like mulch or wood chips or something like that that sort of delineates the woods from the lawn. And one, that barrier prevents the ticks. They don't want to walk across that hot mulch and come in from the woods onto your lawn. And it also gives you a visual reminder of where you're safer and not quite as safe. And then the other thing that I like to talk about are perimeter sprays. So you can actually spray the perimeter of your yard in that kind of border area to kill ticks. There's pluses and minuses to it. You're going to use a spray that's based on permethrin, so that's pretty low toxicity to you. The negative is that you will kill beneficial insects, which I feel bad about. So it really comes down to, you know, what your yard looks like. But if you're living in a yard that's sort of like out in the woods, and especially if you have grandchildren that are coming over to play in your yard frequently, it's something worth considering doing. So you really want to just do the yard perimeter, the shady perennial beds. In most cases, you don't need to do it on the lawn, so anybody that you hire that says, I'm going to spray your whole yard, that's usually not necessary. TERC stands for the Tick Environmental Research Center at the University of Rhode Island. They recommend hiring a licensed professional pest control applicator, but in fact, you can buy the pesticide at Lowe's or Home Depot and use one of those pump sprayers and do it yourself if you want to save some money.
Does it also take care of ants and other?
It would kill ants. It will kill just about every insect. So it kills the bad ones and it also sadly kills the good ones. But you're only going to spray about a 3 or 4 foot swath around the perimeter of the yard, you know. So we won't go into all of that. So if you're going to hire someone, you ask them where they're going to be applying the product. If they say the entire yard, you don't need to do that. And then they recommend 2 applications work best and should be done in mid-May and again in mid-June. And then you could also do one in the fall after the emergence of the adult stage ticks, typically in mid-October. Because that's when you're going to be out raking your leaves. Let's see, mice. So, remember I said the larval and the nymphal ticks feed on small mammals, which are typically mice. They say, do things to make sure you don't have mice in your yards. Well, good luck with that. However, I did stop using a bird feeder, sadly, because I felt like I was feeding more mice and chipmunks than I was feeding birds. So, or if you're going to feed the birds, move it away from the house. But I don't think it's realistic to think that we're going to get rid of mice.
But if you have them in your home, like the person I knew that got babesiosis, she has a vacation home, so it's empty a lot.
Right.
And so she knows she has a lot of problems with mice.
Right.
So is that probably where she got the babesiosis from?
So the mice are sort of the reservoir of the disease. Remember, the larval ticks
Right.
don't have the
The
disease.
tick got it from the mouse, and then that's how she got it.
Right. And then, so the larval tick picks it up from the mouse, and then after the larval tick molts into a nymph, the nymph takes another blood meal and
So that's how she
gives
was at
it to
higher risk.
another mouse or another animal. So the less mice you have like less of a reservoir of the disease around your house.
Because I'd never heard of babesiosis before, but she almost died. I mean, it was really
people
serious.
can be really, really sick.
She was a senior.
Yep.
So she needs to tackle her mouse problem.
Yes, I would say so. That will help. It can't hurt, and who wants mice anyway?
No, but she's just sort of one of these kind of, I do the best I can, I deter them, but I think she needs to do more.
And then I'm not even going to really go into tick tubes. There were these tubes stuffed with cotton, treated with permethrin. The idea was that mice would take the permethrin-treated cotton and take it back to their nests, and that they would nest in it, and it would kill the ticks that were on the mice. But there's limited evidence that really works. You'll still see people advocating for using them, but they've done enough studies now that they won't hurt if you want to use them, but I wouldn't be confident that you've solved the problem if you do use them.
And you need multiple tubes,
Yeah,
they
a
say
lot.
like 30
Yeah,
round,
a lot,
you
all
know,
over
it's
your
not just
yard.
one paper towel.
So, and I think that's why our prevention messaging has now changed to the permethrin-treated clothing, because we know it works. And it's pretty easy to do. So my take-home messages are, if you feel unwell in the summer, don't ignore it. Use permethrin-treated clothing and wear repellents, daily tick check, and reduce tick habitat in your yard, and use additional strategies as you see appropriate. So those are my take-homes.
So one of the things that freaked me out is, once they figured out I had Lyme disease, they said, where were you 10 days from it? Of course, it was in my yard, gardening. And I have a garden in the sun, but I have 3 compost piles that I use to put in my garden every year. And after having Lyme disease and being really sick, I went out to my garden and I had left my little roll stool that I use to go along.
Yeah.
It was covered with ticks.
Ooh.
Absolutely freaked me out, and I didn't go in the garden so I'm wondering if I'm breeding ticks in my compost pile.
Well, are mice living in your compost pile? So
I didn't
remember,
see any, but
remember in the fall, like the adult ticks take a final meal off of a mouse or something, and then they're gonna detach and they're gonna overwinter and then lay their eggs in the spring. So if that infected tick is riding on a mouse and then the mouse is in your compost pile, then the adult tick drops off, it's had its blood meal, and then that's where it's gonna lay its eggs.
they're covered. I mean, but
So-
mice find their way. I mean,
Of course.
I've never seen mice, but
I never see them either, but I know they're
my cat finds mice all the time.
We know they're there.
Right. So then I was really happy to see, after avoiding my garden and not planting anything in it, that the wild turkeys were feasting, and I'm like, I hope they're eating all those ticks. And then I heard possums eat ticks too.
I believe it. I know they say turkeys do, but you know.
They were feasting in my garden. I'm like, good, eat them all because I ate them.
But if they're laying 3,000 eggs, that's a lot of ticks, right?
Right, and it sounds like your stool somehow like ended up in a nest of ticks.
Well, it was in the corner of the garden. You know how I just put it there with my tools underneath it. And I'm like,
I know.
Yeah.
go near it.
So that gets to the point that these things can be anywhere, and you just
And that's out
we're
in the
living
sun.
amongst them.
That's in the
I
middle of my
know.
lawn,
know.
a square in the sun. But the compost is a nice
Right.
cover.
Right.
God, it drives me crazy.
So I can see why you're recommending the treated clothing, because then that protects you versus trying to protect your environment completely, because you
Right.
can't ever really.
Right. We can't get rid of them in the environment. They're there. They're
So
gonna
focus
be
on
there.
protecting yourself.
That's right.
And I had never heard about them.
And I've heard kind of a variety of how long you should be treated with
Yes.
the antibiotic. I've heard 24 days, 72, 21. Do you?
I'm not a medical professional,
It's
so I
on
won't
there
get
with,
into it.
there's a government website for Lyme disease, and I used to know the numbers off the top of my
21
head.
days is barely typical.
So in the infectious disease clinic at Leahy Clinic would only treat me whatever it was under the recommended time for Lyme disease. And I argued and fought, and they wouldn't give me any more than the day she thought was appropriate. And I had a relapse 3 years later, all my joints blew up. I had water in my elbows, I had TMJ, and I couldn't walk, both of my knees were like balloons. And they took turns blowing up. And it was the rheumatoid arthritis doctor I went to recommended me to get 24 days of infusion at Emerson every day at 3 o'clock for 24 days. I limped in there with 2 knee braces, and 7 days later, all my blood counts came down. And it was and my insurance wouldn't cover it, and he fought for me. He said, you need to have this done, because I'm like, can't I wait till after the summer? Because you're getting an antibiotic, you can't go in the sun, you can't drink, you can't do anything, you can't swim, because you have this pick lining in. And he goes, no, you gotta get it now. And I said, well, you're saying to me my insurance won't cover it. He goes, you get it done, and I will make sure your insurance covers it. And that was Dr. Mark Allen, he's my hero. I love
Sounds
him.
like it.
Where
But
is he?
He in Concord, right near Concord Hillside, but one of those other buildings. He's a rheumatoid arthritis guy, and he was wonderful.
Now, you're giving Leggy a bad name, but that was 5 years ago, so they might have.
2013.
So they might have, they're.
And it does depend which doctor you get. You know, she had an attitude that, no, that's fine, and then she was You have to do your research, and I even showed her what's recommended on the government website, and she was like, I don't believe it's.
And unfortunately, what I've seen is that a lot of different practitioners kind of do something a little bit differently.
They're trying to get
My
there.
experience has been.
Yeah, and Lady couldn't even test the tick, I can't the tick, and they wouldn't test it, I got tested it for it.
Well, thank you, Susan and Trish, very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.